On this episode of the No Name Yet podcast, we talk to Perry Junjulas, the Executive Director of the Albany Damien Center, and we talk about living with AIDS, the Damien Center, and who is the better cook. Well, welcome to the No Name Yet podcast. I would like all our listeners and all our watchers to refer to the St. James New York Mills YouTube page. Last week we had our telethon and we spent a lot of time making videos to make you laugh. And what we would like you to do is to watch that content. To watch that content, we will be dropping highlights of that telethon every day or every other day for your enjoyment. So please go by the St. James New York Mills YouTube page and enjoy the fun that we had, because we want you to have fun too, especially in the last year that we've gone through, that we all could use a laugh. So today, our guest on the No Name Yet podcast is Perry Junjulas. And did I say that name correctly?
You got it perfect.
All right. And I know that your husband has told me that you're Italian.
Italian, Greek, and Polish. So
Junjulas is Greek.
Junjulas is Greek. Yep, every grandson was named Perry through the generations, I guess.
Okay. So you have to forgive me. My Italian side looked at your last name and said, I've never heard that last name.
Yep, that's the Greek.
All right. So do you have any opening comments right now?
I'm just wondering if we're going to name this podcast today.
Well, you're wondering, and a lot of other people are wondering. I just haven't named this podcast yet. Do you have any suggestions?
Oh, wow. Because you said you have a background in improv theater, I think it's got to be something very flashy, very theater-like. So that'll be my only advice as far as to, as you journey through this naming process.
All right. And like our government officials, I'm going to form a task force to name the podcast, and we'll get back to each and every person who has made a suggestion.
Oh dear. I'll look forward to the coming of that report in 2024.
Yeah, thank you. That's about the timetable I think we're looking at.
We're working like the government. That's about what we're looking at. Yep.
So Perry, once again, I thank you for coming on and having a conversation. Before we start, I usually have a background of a hotel room behind me. Each episode, I pick a different hotel room, usually from the 50s or 60s.
Nice.
Because they're a little more attractive to the eye. But we're kind of doing this on the road, and I was wondering, as I look at my image, I feel like I'm doing this from the bathroom.
I was going to say a closet, but I do like the picture though. You got that picture on the side there that's got some art to it. Although I'm trying to read what your notes are there. It looks like a cross. Looks like, I'm not sure. Anyway.
Yeah, this is Psalm 121.
Oh, it was okay.
This is a list of spiritual care gates by Paul Preiser.
Nice. Well,
I bet everybody in the audience has just perked up. And
yeah. Well, I received my second COVID vaccine this past Friday. So in 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks, I get to go back to the office at the Albany Damien Center, which, it's been very nice working here. It's very comfortable, but oh goodness, it's been a year and I'm ready to see people. So, still safely and still wearing a mask, but I just am looking forward to being able to get back to a little bit of normal.
Yes. And so you have been working from home this past year.
Yeah, we quickly, when COVID hit, because people with HIV and AIDS have weakened immune systems, we knew early on that if people with HIV and AIDS contracted COVID, it would be most likely very bad for them. We've now seen some published, at least three published studies that have shown that persons with HIV and AIDS are dying at higher rates from COVID than the general population. So our suspicions were correct. So we quickly, converted our services to takeout delivery, moved 90% of the staff to their homes, which included me. And the board of directors, the Damien Center, they were very supportive. They wanted to ensure that, I did not get sick because in addition to my living with AIDS, I also have other comorbid conditions, plus my age is a factor. I'm 55. So, they said, please get yourself in bubble wrap, get home. And so, I've been able to operate the Damien Center out of my house quite effectively, for the past year, which has been I feel very fortunate. I've been able to stay safe during that time. I know a lot of other people had to go into work and had to face the risks, which is, hard. We do have staff because we have on-site tenants. I do have staff that do have to be at the Damien Center, our front desk staff, our housing staff. So, we've been taking all precautions to make sure that they're safe.
And we will let the audience know that you are a person living with AIDS and that you are the director of the Damien Center, and that's located in Albany, New York. And we'll talk more about the Damien Center. A question that just came up for me is that those employees that did have to be on site with the residents, I was just curious, did they qualify as frontline workers, and were they able to get the vaccination when it came
Yes.
out?
When it first opened, when it first came up, they qualified because we're considered a congregate setting.
So, so those people that you wanted to get vaccinated did get vaccinated.
Yes. And so, of course, not everyone, I have not made it mandatory, which most places are not making it mandatory. So I still have some people that are, still nervous about taking it. So they've opted out. But we're really trying to provide as much education about this as possible, especially to the residents who are living with HIV and AIDS, because we fought too hard to survive HIV and AIDS to have COVID take us out.
Mm.
And that's really, I can understand their fear. For many of us who are living with AIDS long term, we were the guinea pigs back in the 90s. When a brand new drug came out, we were the ones that tried it. We had all these side effects, and then they would say that drug's no good. We got to try this one. So we lived it, we get it, but also it's why we're alive today that we did that. And we were all at the time, when that new drug came out, we didn't care about the side effects because we were so desperate to live. So the fact that something was going to do all these horrible things to you, it didn't matter because it wasn't death. So we were like, okay, we'll take it. So I have a similar frame of mind to the COVID vaccine. I was nervous about it. I was nervous about the side effects, but there was nothing that was going to stop me from getting it because, again, I've watched already too many people die of COVID, and I just know that this would not be a good outcome for myself. So I said, and so I was very fortunate to get on a waiting list at Ellis Medicine, of essentially if at the end of the day they had extra vaccine that was defrosted and they had cancellation. So sure enough, in a snowstorm, we get a call 3 o'clock. Tony and I race over to, it was a snowstorm. We race over. I guess that's why they had cancellations, because it was snowing so bad. But we raced over, and thankfully I was able to get vaccinated. So I was very grateful.
And for those who have seen episodes of the No Name podcast, that Perry's husband, Bishop Tony Green, was a guest on the podcast. And, well, he was a guest on the podcast.
Yeah,
And
he's been going into work every day through the pandemic into the hospital. So that was also a big concern in the beginning. At first I was like, sanitize yourself before you come in. People
Right.
are concerned about, but at the hospital, they are doing an incredible job of keeping people safe, the workers. So, that gave me a good sense of confidence that when he came home, we were probably in good shape. So,
Yeah, and when you were talking about people that were reluctant to get the vaccine, uh, the selling point for me, I think probably anybody was nervous about getting the vaccine because it came out so quickly.
yeah,
And I know that there are many different points of concerns and hesitation, whether it be medical status, whether it be uh, uh, different races and upbringings, uh, because of a history of how medicines were tested
yeah,
on people. But the one thing that really made me feel a bit more confident about this vaccine was that this research was research based on the SARS research.
mhm,
So they had, when SARS was going throughout the world, they developed a vaccine. And by the time they developed the vaccine, SARS was pretty much gone, and they really had no one to vaccinate.
vaccinate.
And it made me feel a little better that they didn't just come up with this one in the 6 to 9 months that it took them to get it, that there was research that was 20 years old that they based this on.
No, that I think combined with also, the amount of testing that they did do, quite a few, tests were done. This wasn't just, as much as it was rushed, it was also, tested thoroughly. And so I think, if I was in that first week of people getting it, might have been a little more nervous because it's like,
Mhm.
oh, but by the time I went, I think close to 40 million people had already been vaccinated. So I said, okay, if there were major troubles with this, we would have heard something. We would have heard, I mean, granted, we don't know the long-term effects, but also, again, the long-term effects of having COVID are unknown as well. I've had
Right.
a number of people I know who have had COVID, and they're still experiencing months and months later, some effects from COVID, some really serious effects. So, a part of this is trusting in the science, which again, you're right. A lot of people historically have no reason to trust some of these things. But I would hope that today we are in a different age where we can put some trust and really get this to underserved communities who really need to be protected because our low income uh, communities, our Black and Brown communities, they are going to be more impacted by COVID. I mean, they've already shown some studies with that. So to not vaccinate these communities would be, in my opinion, a crime. So that's where I think just more education, more getting people to answer all their questions, and make them feel comfortable is really, really important.
So when did you first find out that you were HIV positive?
So in 1995, I got very sick very quick. So for a lot of people, when they contract HIV, they don't even know it. So it's there's no change. But I had a very difficult what they call a seroconversion. Essentially, it's when HIV, when you get HIV. I got very sick, lost a lot of weight, lymph nodes that were the size of softballs,
Hmm.
that was really hard, at first to sort of come back for that. I was also misdiagnosed. They thought I had cancer. It wasn't cancer, it was actually HIV. So they had done some surgery. So I had a pretty rough start to it. So, and back in 95, you looked around, there was really only one med that was out. It was AZT, and it wasn't really helping people. So people were still dying at a very high rate. So the doctors told me I had 3 months to live. I had no reason to doubt them because I'm watching everyone around me die. So that's when I went to the Damien Center. I heard about this place that was helping people try to figure out how the heck to deal with this. And I'll never forget walking up to the door, and someone came down. They kicked the door open. There was no sign or anything. You know, it was like Grace and Holy Innocents Church. You know, it was like a side door. Kicked the door open, and they asked me some questions, and apparently I gave them the right answers. I walked up this creepy hallway down up a creepy set of stairs, and opened the doors to these two rooms where there was laughter, there was crying, but there was people that were coming together in such a special way that made me feel that I wasn't alone. That feeling was something to hold on to back then, even as I started going to the Damien Center. You know, I would say, you know, a lot of times 10 people would come in, the next week, 9 of them would be gone. The next week, new people would come in, and all 10 of those would be gone. I mean, people were actively dying around us. But for those of us who were alive, you know, kind of coming back each day, you know, it would be amazing to, you know, oh, you're still here, you know. There was this connection. And remember, too, this was back when there really was no internet, there was no computers per se. So your information was all really word of mouth.
So what happened at the door? What kind of questions were you asked at the door, and was that a screening because of the prejudice about people with AIDS?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I don't remember the questions, um, but I do remember it was where if I didn't answer them correctly, they weren't going to let me in because it was all about the severe discrimination and prejudice that was happening at that time. I mean, people were dying in their houses and ambulances were refusing to pick up the body.
Mm.
I mean, it was being refused care, people not wanting to touch you, you know. I mean, it was just an incredibly horrible time. And I mean, HIV and AIDS had been around for a while. We knew quite a bit around that time, but still, and I mean, I'll even argue today, still, there's a lot of fear and misconceptions about HIV and AIDS that still are present today that stop people from getting into care. But yeah, that was really the focus of the Damien Center was they wanted to create this super secretive place that people could come together and feel safe, but also not be harassed, which, you know, certainly, you know, was happening.
So the Damien Center offered an incredible amount of support in a time uh, where it probably seemed, and actually there were not a lot of places to turn.
Yeah. No, there really was no other place like this. In fact, as we understand it, it was the first drop-in center in the nation for persons with HIV. So, you know, and it was amazing because at this time it was all about preparing to die. So, you know, it was like, do you have your will done? Do you have your healthcare proxy? Do you have your DNRs, you know, signed? You know, are you comfortable? Do you have enough food? Do you have you know, do you have a comfortable pillow? Do you have a place to sleep? You know, it was all about how we were going to enter this dying process and you know, how we were going to navigate that. So the fascinating thing was that around 97, 98, 99, that's when the other drugs started hitting. So I talked about with COVID, you know, we were the guinea pigs, right, if you would. And we were desperate to get on these. You know, that's the thing. You know, friends of mine would get on trials and I'd be jealous because I'd be like, oh, why couldn't I have gotten on that trial? You know, I didn't qualify for some reason. But all of a sudden, we found what we call the Lazarus effect. Those of us who were on point to die, all of a sudden, we're still alive. So, you
The
know,
Lazarus effect.
yeah, so all of
Yeah.
a sudden we were, we were on point to die. We, you know, all the plans were made. We, you know, for some people blew out their savings, you know, cashed in their life insurance policies. There were these viatical settlement companies that would come around and they would give you 50 cents on the dollar for your life insurance policy. So if you
Wow.
had a $50,000 life insurance, they might give you 25,000, you know, for it. But you were dead, you know, we're like, well, I'm not going to live, so why not? You know, I'll take the money now, you know, and stuff. Um, so, you know, it slowly changed though as we were starting to take the new meds. Now, the new meds were, I will tell you, they were awful. They were, the side effects were just, to describe them is really, you know, but all of a sudden we were living. And so the Damien Center evolved to how do we live with this disease now and the side effects that were still very apparent for a number of years. Thankfully, over time, they've really perfected a lot of the medications. They don't produce the side effects that, were there before. But it was not uncommon for it to go on a drug, wake up the next morning, and you'd be head to toe with a rash and have to be rushed to the hospital, and that happened to me. Um, it was interesting because I had a roommate at the time, and I'm sitting having breakfast, and then he looks at me and goes, "You feel okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just tired, and stuff." He said, "Really?" He goes, "Not." And I said, "Yeah, why? What's?" He goes, "Look, go look in the mirror." I was still waking up. Looked in the mirror. I was broken out, head to toe. I just hadn't looked at myself yet, And so off to the hospital. Um, so dealing with those was the necessary evil to stay alive, if you would. And we learned a lot from those of us who were on those drugs, which helped the better drugs to come out. So slowly, the Damien Center started really being about helping people to take their medications and learn how do you live again. How do you live? You can't work. You're going to be sick because of the side effects still. So what do you do? How do so we did a lot of that.
Mhm.
Um, Flash forward, to today, the meds are much better. People can, I mean, look at me. I'm the person that was supposed to die, and here I am, 55. So grateful to be here. We find a lot of people now with the meds, they're able to go back to work. They're able to have kids. They're able to do the things that they wanted to do pre-HIV. So I think the hard part for people is that the reason why the Damien Center still exists and is needed is that not everybody is able to take the medicines as prescribed. They're either too afraid. The stigma is still very much out there. But also, we recognize if you don't have housing, if you don't have food, if you have mental health issues, if you have a substance use disorder, and all of this is related to trauma too, childhood trauma, you're not going to be accessing the medications or the care that you need. So we work on all those social determinants of health. Someone walks in, they're homeless. Okay, let's get you housed. Let's figure out how you're going to eat every day. Let's figure out what mental health, substance use issues you may, want to work on. And then let's figure out what the next steps are. We have an employment program that helps people get back to work after not working for many years.
So,
So that's
so going from that room up at the top of the stairs,
it's
what is the Damien Center now?
well, the journey was interesting because we ended up leaving those two rooms, and that's where I was going to the Damien Center regularly, and they asked me to join their board. So I said, "Oh, okay, I'll join the board, And I had a little bit of a background in real estate, and they said we want to move. So I said, okay, let's move. How much money you got? Nothing. They were in debt. There was no money. Everything kept getting stolen at the place. I mean, it would be uncommon to walk into the Damien Center and the phone would be gone, TV would be gone. So anyway, long story short, I wrote a grant. I'd never written a grant before for this idea I had in my head of this house that had a living room with all these other rooms for, massage or healing, counseling, so we bought the house at 12 South Lake Avenue, right around, right in Albany, from Family and Children's Services. A lot of great help from the Community AIDS Partnership, from the First AIDS Walk. And we spent 15 years at this little house on South Lake Avenue that was really almost like a home uh, for people. That building unfortunately burned down in August 2013. Got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning that the place was on fire, and we lost everything that day. So we moved to the church, and at the time, we said, "What do we do? Do we go home? Do we call it a day?" But we knew that there was a huge need still.
Mm.
And the number of people who were homeless that we were serving was just through the roof. It always killed me at night because if they didn't want to go to the shelter because I give them a ride down to the shelter, about 8 o'clock, I knew that some of them were just going around the corner and they were winding up sleeping in our backyard because it was safe, and in the morning they would get up at sunrise so that, they'd be at the front door like they just showed up, from somewhere else. I knew what was going on. So we had an ambitious plan to build a new Damien Center that had housing. And with a lot of help from the community, from the state of New York, we built this $5.2 million building that 20 huge on Madison Avenue. We renovated a historic building, added on to it, and we've been there now for 3 years, going into our fourth year. And it's really an incredible building that we designed, from scratch. It's got that living room, that same living room that I talked about, feel when you walk in. But we have a state-of-the-art kitchen now because we serve close to 40,000 meals a year to people. We put a pharmacy right in the building. There's a gym. There's a computer room. There's all these rooms for supportive counseling, but there's also 20 apartments. And these apartments are for people who are homeless or were homeless and struggling, with HIV and AIDS. But we had a dream and we said, you know what, we can help more people. And so I feel so fortunate that we had such incredible support. And so we have about 30 staff. We serve about 400 people who are living with HIV and AIDS. And these are persons who typically are very low income, majority from Black and Brown communities. Majority all have either diagnosed mental health issues, substance use issues, histories of trauma. These are persons who generally have a lot of trouble getting into care, and we help them with that. We say, come on in, make yourself at home, and then let's figure out where you want to start. Where you haven't eaten today? Okay, we're going to start there. We're going to start there with a home cooked meal. We make all our meals fresh on site. We have a chef, Claire, who's been with us now for over 9 years, makes everything from scratch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So,
Wow.
get you some food. That's the first basic step. Everyone, that's to me, it's not a privilege to eat.
Right.
It is something that we are obligated to do for our fellow person.
Yeah.
So meals have, and to me, always, I guess we go back to being Italian, right? Everything happens over a meal, and my mother, God rest her soul, I lost my mother back in January. But, it was kind of like that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where, she says, you hungry? No. Good. I'll make you something.
Yeah.
That was my mother. She was always feeding people, so we sort of translated that into the Damien Center. You come in, well, you got to eat first, but also, okay, what's going on? Well, we become their family.
And I think, as people go through, through their day-to-day lives, um, that we might just not acknowledge or not even realize, uh, like a place like the Damien Center is offering, a pharmacy, is offering a meal, is offering computers, is offering friendship, love, and support. And a lot of people go through their lives taking those things for granted. And what occurred to me when you were talking about it, that even just focusing on the computer lab, offering access to a computer to somebody who doesn't have access to a computer opens up an incredible amount of assistance and access to things, again, that folks that have a device or multiple devices take that access for granted.
You're right. You don't think about these things. I mean, in some of the needs, we have a shower room that people can take a shower in. We always keep fresh towels and everything. Because for some people, yes, homeless on the street, but also some people are just living in a situation where it's not necessarily safe for them. It's on someone's couch. It's on someone, so they're not comfortable with, they can't use the other facilities. It's truly just a couch to flop on, just to feel human, to feel,
Hmm.
that is, the person would come out of the bathroom and just like, just that act of being able to wash yourself, and brush your teeth and stuff, is again stuff we take for granted. But for a lot of people, it's something they don't have. And to me, again, is something so simple that we can provide. Yeah, computers. Everything is done on the computer nowadays.
Right.
So not having a computer became a real thing, which is why the Whispering Angels of Saratoga Springs, we have helped us with a generous donation to get our computer room going. So it was great when we got the computers, but then you put someone in front of a computer who has never used a computer really. What do you do? So we needed to get volunteers, volunteers to help people to navigate and show them how to use Facebook. Here, connect to the world, connect
Yes.
to other people, that connection, that's the one thing during COVID, I think, that became apparent all of a sudden to everybody in the world was the negative effects of social isolation. Well, for people with HIV and AIDS, we could have told you that way before COVID because many of us isolated ourselves because we were afraid of the discrimination. We were just afraid, as a person living with AIDS, I can say this, we felt unworthy. We felt dirty. We felt like, we couldn't be around people. So we isolated ourselves. That has really bad side effects to being isolated, as we've all witnessed this past year. And so a part of the Damien Center is just, I would say to people always, good to see you. Come back again tomorrow. I want to see you again this week. You need to get out of that house. You need to get out of where you're at and just be around us. I don't care if you're in a bad mood. You don't have to be in a good mood to be at the Damien Center. You can sit there and let it out.
Yes.
It's a safe space. So people want to sit there and say how bad their life sucks. Well, yeah, you know what? I'm going to sit there and tell you that that really is bad. I'm not going to sit here and say the grass is greener over on the, whatever. I'm going to tell you that this really sucks what you're going through, but we're with you. We're
Right.
with
And
you.
it's a self perpetuating cycle a lot of times. Well, I'm not going to go out because I'm in a bad mood, but you might be in a bad mood because you haven't gone out.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It really, and people would always say, it took a lot for me to get here today, but I really do feel better now that I got here and now that I've been here for a little bit. And we didn't do anything super magical. We just created a place where the person felt comfortable, again, where the person was able to interact, even if they were just, I always said, even if a person's just sitting there watching, they're interacting. They're getting, I've had people that would just sit in the lobby and they would just sit there and people would be like, why is that person just sitting there? I said, that's how they're interacting with everybody. They don't need to talk to everybody. They're taking it all in. They're a part of it. And there's a healing power to that. I absolutely believe that because as beings, we're social beings. We're
Yes.
not meant to be, we're not built, if you would, to be isolated. But HIV, because of the stigma, just created all of this isolation that really wrecked people's lives in many ways. The number of people that have committed suicide uh, that I've known is just it's too much. It's too much, and that was a product, in my opinion, of that despair, of that being alone, of feeling that nobody was there for them. Is something that the Damien Center can help with. That's what I always say to people. I don't care how bad of a day you're having. You come in. You come in. Let's figure it out. Let's figure it out. Or you know what? Let's not figure it out. Let's just play a game of cards. Some of the most therapeutic things I ever saw at the Damien Center was when people got together to play cards, spades. They would throw their cards down. That act of throwing that, they were getting their anger out. I would watch this, and then they start yelling at each other, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, not a bad thing. They're getting their stuff out. It never got out of hand, and everybody kind of, understood. But I think, the other thing I've found too over the years we talk about taking things for granted. I've always seen the people at the Damien Center that have the least give anything they have to help another person.
Mm.
I've seen this time and time again. Someone that does not have a dollar to their name, if they have $5, they'll give that $5 to someone else if they were going to help them. And that just always amazed me. A lot of us who have things, right? We'll give a little bit of what we have. Here, I watch people who have nothing give everything they have to someone else without even hesitating.
Right. Right.
Wow. Why? How can I not? How can I not want to help people?
Really, all people have to do is find themselves in that situation, and in the company of somebody who doesn't have anything. And when you're around folks like that long enough, that's a scenario that plays itself out over and over and over again.
And I keep saying is that it doesn't have to be like this. If we have the power to help, I'll always say to the staff, yes, we want to look at numbers. We serve 40,000 meals. We serve, we have 400 people we're helping. The numbers, yeah, they're impressive, right? It comes down to that one person who walks in the door. How'd you help that one person? How'd that one person feel when they walked in?
Mm-hmm.
How did that one person treat one other person? That's where it starts. And so that's been sort of what we've really tried to do at the Damien Center. People often will say the magic of the Damien Center, or that it's a magical place. There's no magic in it. To me, it's kind of, goes back to maybe some of my, um, Christian upbringing. It's treating people with kindness, treating people the way you want to be treated, and accepting them for who they are. We always say, meet people where they're at, accept them who they are. Well, people can be complicated. People can have complicated backgrounds, and to accept them for who they are is one of the biggest gifts you can give them, because a lot of times they didn't choose the path that they went on. It was sort of chosen for them because of a lot of different systemic racism, trauma, the way they were brought up, the childhood traumas. That sort of set the stage for where they were, what they were going to experience. How can we change that? How can we do a reset? Or how can I at least provide a place that people feel that they've got a connection? I can't tell you how many people that would come would unfortunately end up incarcerated again. But they'd show up at the Damien Center the minute they got out. They wouldn't even, the minute they got out, they would show up and they'd be like, "I'm back. I'm home." They'd be like, I always knew, because I always keep track of everyone. But I always knew what that meant. That meant they were home.
And it's a place that they can call home.
Yeah, yeah. And we're not going to sit there and judge them and say, but no. It's like, okay, you know what?
Because there's plenty of judgment out in the world as there is.
Everyone, you got to figure, for a lot of our people, they're invisible in the community. They're the person that everybody walks by on the bench, as they're going to the grocery store, the person that may or may not have their hand out, but they just don't, that people just don't acknowledge. They're invisible. So you talk about social isolation. They can be isolated just being in our community because nobody will pay them mind. And here all of a sudden they come to the Damien Center, and I know their name, I know they're a little bit about them, and someone takes an interest in them. Wow. 4 blocks over, they didn't get that treatment. They got shunned. They got, get away from me. Why are you looking at me? Why are you following me? Get away from me.
Your involvement in the Damien Center appears to give you life.
It was interesting when I told you, back in, I don't know, it was 90, 98, 98, 97, when I wrote that first grant. A part of getting the grant was they said, would you stay on with this project for a year? So they brought me on as executive director. I said, yeah, 1 year. That was 22 years ago. I sort of just fell in love with, and I never planned on becoming an executive director or running a nonprofit. I mean, that was never a thought, but I just I guess I learned a lot through hard knocks over the years, what to do, what not to do. I also learned, what do you do when, all of a sudden your agency burns down and you need to help people. I mean, we served lunch that day. The Damien Center was still burning, and I had directed everybody because people were starting to show up. I said, go to the church, tell Pastor Ali I just need to camp here for the day. We served lunch that day to people. We didn't miss a beat. Yeah,
Oh.
we had nothing. We had
Mhm.
not a pen, not a. I'll never forget the first staff meeting the day after the fire. We brought pens and we brought pads in because we had nothing. There was nothing that really could be salvaged. So, and the church was very magnanimous with letting us stay there for 4 years. We were sort of like the person that came on your couch and never left.
Right. Reminds me of a story. I don't know if it's legend or not, about Thomas Edison, that his laboratory started on fire, and he was standing there watching it burn, and he turned to his staff and he said, "So who knows somebody who's got money
Oh,
so we can
I,
rebuild?"
I totally get that feel because I mean, really, I was outside the Damien Center. I was watching, people were coming up, they were falling apart. I said, no, no. I said, you got to get to work, go, and figure out how we're going to get lunch.
Yeah.
Let's go. There's no point in us all sitting here watching this darn thing. I said, everybody go direct. So we had one person that was directing people as they showed up. They brought them right over to the church, which was right around the corner. I will say I've been very fortunate to love what I do. I love the impact that we've had on people, and for the people that, let's face it, not everybody survives this, even with the medications. We've had a tremendous amount of loss over the past 22 years. The people that I can remember that were just, and what I always say is, for that period of time that we were in their lives, we gave them something special. And I can't tell you how many people we were there at the end. We were there to hold their hand.
Mhm.
We were there so they didn't die alone. And still to this day, we're still ensuring that we've that a person is treated with some dignity and respect at the end. Um, one of our chronically homeless persons who we had housed, who unfortunately passed away. No money, but community was able to get a site at Albany at the cemetery. We were able to have a service for him. He deserved that. When you come into the Damien Center family, we'll keep with you until you don't want us.
Mhm.
I'll run into people at Price Chopper and they'll be like, "Oh, I haven't been over in the longest time. I've been busy with the kids and doing this and doing that." I'm like, "You're living life.
Yes, life's
Exactly.
happening.
It's exactly what I wanted for you." They're feeling guilty for not coming out. I'm like, no, no, you're doing it. You call us when you need us,
Yeah.
and just check in every once in a while. Just tell us how you're doing, but you're good.
Yeah.
So
Well, I want to ask you one more thing. HIV and AIDS has been around, acknowledged since the 1980s. And I think for a lot of people, it's one of those things that people don't think about much anymore. Given the opportunity, what would you say to people about taking the right precautions to prevent the transmission of HIV, and how much of a crisis is it still?
sure. So I think this is the biggest thing. When we stopped dying every 2 minutes, we stopped being news, and so people didn't really hear about HIV. So we absolutely still have a pandemic that we're dealing with HIV. We're getting better at it. So we're seeing some of the numbers decrease, but there are still new HIV infections every day, especially here in the capital region. Because of our proximity really to New York City, which was the epicenter of the epidemic, we were sort of a gateway. So the capital region area does have a large number of persons who are living with HIV. The thing is, with the science we have today, that's the thing to really know, is that if you do test positive for HIV, we have treatments that are available. The treatments we have available are so good that they can reduce the viral loads to such a low level, it's called undetectable. It just means that our current science can't detect it. It's still there. But science has shown us that you will live a life just as long as someone who's not HIV positive, and it is physically impossible for you to pass the virus to someone else. So when I say to people, get an HIV test, take charge of your sexual health, or if you're sharing needle equipment, get a clean syringe. But find out if you're positive. That's the first thing. You don't want to not know, because if you don't know, you could wind up showing up at the hospital with full-blown AIDS, and by then it might be too late. The virus would have done a lot of damage. The other thing, and if you don't know how to get into care or into the meds, we'll help you. Just give us a call. We'll help you from start to finish, figure it out. Don't have housing? We'll help you figure that out too. Don't have food? We'll figure it out. Let us know. Now, if you're HIV negative, awesome. Stay that way. We have a pill now, once a day pill. It's called PrEP. It's a little, I call it the other blue pill. Um, that people take once a day, and that prevents you from contracting HIV. Now, it won't prevent STIs, hepatitis C, but there are cures for those. And syphilis and gonorrhea, I mean, those are out of control in this area too. But you've got cures for those. HIV, there is no cure. So you really want to not contract HIV as much as possible. So if you're sexually active, yes, we recommend using a condom, but get on PrEP. That has been proven to could stop. So we have tools today, and really what it's about, because sex is really the way that HIV is being transmitted most. We've eliminated mother to child transmission. That's done because we test every mother and every child and get them right on treatment. So that we're done there. We've had no babies born in New York State with HIV in a long time. Needle exchange, down to almost 4% of new infection. It's amazing how much work has been done there. But we're still not addressing people's sexual health and talking about positive ways that people can, reduce the harm in contracting HIV.
That no matter who your partner is, whether it's a heterosexual encounter or a gay lesbian encounter, that the HIV can still be transmitted.
Biggest misnomer out there is that it's a gay disease. Really, that was yes, the 80s. That's how it all kind of started, but not today. Today, we see everyone being at risk who is having sex. And am I going to tell people how to have sex? Absolutely not. It's a natural human thing for us to do, but there are ways to take care of your sexual health. There's ways to prevent, but also get tested on a regular basis, because if you do contract it, we can help. And I think that's one of the largest growing segments of the population that are contracting HIV is our 13 to 24-year-olds.
Mm.
13 to 24. So in addition to worrying about our youth, who are impulsive to begin with, right? Youth do stuff, they think about it later. We're not providing them with enough education, of how to take care of their sexual health, because nobody wants to admit the 13-year-old or their 17-year-old are having sex. Well, they are. They are, unfortunately, because we're seeing it. That's how they're contracting the disease. So we need to provide some real comprehensive, age-appropriate sexual health education. And if we're not able to do it in the schools, it's got to be the parents, it's got to be the teachers, it's got to be somebody's got to be talking to the kids.
Yeah.
And I want to say also to our older adults who don't feel like this, this is an issue. That's the other end of the spectrum. Our older adults, people, 16 and older, that's another age group that is contracting HIV at an alarming rates. So again, providing that education, just because you're 70 and having sex does not mean you're immune from HIV.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I wouldn't even think about think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, grandma and grandpa probably do have,
You're right.
you know, they're widowed all of a sudden, and all of a sudden, and how do you protect, ensure that they're protected? You need to be having these conversations, and making them, for some of them, they were married for so long, this wasn't, something they even paid attention to, maybe, now all of a sudden widowed, out on the market again, or, out. You got to learn what this world is now.
Yes. Well, we should wrap it up. And
Thank you for having me, Rich. And during the course of the hour, I have not come up with any suggestions for a name. So
well, I'm not in
I'll
a
keep you
hurry.
posted. But I'll contact your task force, and see if I do have something. I'll know where to find them.
All right. And
Thank you
so
for having me on. I really appreciate it.
oh, you're welcome. And we always end with a prayer. And I would like to, before we do the prayer, I would like to just ask you one last question. Who's a better cook, you or Father Tony?
I have to say Father Tony, because if I don't say that, he'll stop cooking. So,
Okay.
it's absolutely Father Tony.
All right.
Let's just say we each have our specialties, and but he actually does the majority of the cooking. So, he's good.
All right. Let us pray. Father God, I thank you for Perry coming on the podcast today. And that, God, I ask that you be with him and that you be with all the people that work at the Damien Center. That, God, I thank you for that organization and the ministry that they do there for your people. So, God, I ask that you cover the Damien Center and that you put a hedge of protection around that building, and that, Lord, that you bless Perry's family and you put a hedge of protection around them. And that, God, may we stop and often acknowledge your presence in our well-doing. And that, Lord, I ask that you continue to allow Perry to do what he does, putting one step in front of the other and doing it with the joy of Jesus. So, God, we thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Best of luck with your future podcasts. This is
Oh,
wonderful.
oh, thank you.